right, in this tutorial, I want to show you a little bit about the Illustrator workspace. I am currently using Illustrator 2024. You might be watching this in a later date, so most of this is still going to be probably exactly the same. There might be a few things that are slightly different, but generally the updates aren't that dramatic. So let's get started. I want to show you a little bit about the workspace. As I said before, first of all, I'm using a file that you can also use if you have access to it. If not, you can still just open a new file and do something of your own if you would like. But first of all, you would go up to File and you would choose Open, and then you would find the file. In my case, it would be the one called O1 Workspace through O3 Selections.ai. If you are doing your own, then you would go to File, New, and you would just create a new document. But before we do too much more, first thing I want to show you is which workspace I'm actually using. To match what I'm doing, you would go up to Window and then go to Workspace, and then I'm currently using the Essentials Classic. Yours is probably going to start off in Essentials, which might look like this, and that's fine too. But one of the things that's nice about Essentials Classic, as long as you still have access to that, is that the tool set is a little bit more diverse. And so we're going to start with that. So you can either go up to Window, Workspace, and then you can choose it from here. The other thing that you can do as a shortcut is up here, there's this little icon for workspaces, and you can jump over to Essentials Classic here. Now, if for some reason you're in a shared workspace and whenever you go to this, it doesn't look the same, then what you probably want to do is go up here and you want to say Reset Essentials Classic, and then it will automatically then go back to what is the factory default, okay? And in this case, what we've got here is it automatically wants to open up a couple of panels, one being your properties, which is going to be a very general important go-to panel. And the other thing that is notably different between Essentials Classic and Essentials in 2024 is that the tool set, the tool bar over on the left, is in a double panel because it has so many more things that are automatically visible, whereas the regular Essentials limits it to fewer tools. Okay, so that's the first thing that I want to make sure that you are aware of. And I think that's actually quite important to recognize, because there might be times whenever you're following somebody's tutorial, whether it's mine or someone else's, and if the tools don't look the same, then that is going to be extremely helpful for you to understand, so you don't think that you've lost your mind or you just really have no idea what's going on. You always want to be able to go and look and see if maybe somebody's using a different workspace from you. And the big difference between the classic versus the newer version of the tools is that you're maybe going to be seeing somebody using tools that you don't see in the regular newer Essentials. Okay, so next thing I want to show you is a little bit just about how to use some of these panels. So for instance, off to the right over here, you'll see that we've got a bunch of icons. These are all panels, individual panels as well. One that later we're going to use a lot of is this layers panel, for instance. But you'll notice that if you click on these different panels, you get these little flyouts, okay? And if you wanted to expand this, it's got this little double-headed arrow up here, and it would open this up, and then you can look at a whole bunch of different panels. In addition, it's going to limit your workspace a lot in terms of what you're able to see over here. And if you wanted this open, if you have, for instance, a large monitor that you're working on a desktop, then this might be something that is valuable for you to have, where these things are all open. I sometimes find that having too many things visible at once makes it hard for me to find things. That's just me personally. But if you like this and you're on a large space, especially once you get to know the workspace better, you may wish to have things open. Now, if you do something like that, down in the bottom left, you'll see that you have the ability to jump to preset values for the artwork dimensions. So what I like to do is fit on screen if I have changed my tool setup a little bit, unless I need to zoom in, of course. But if you need to see everything at a glance, you can always just jump over here to the fit on screen. But as I said before, if I have too many things open, a lot of times I get a little bit lost visually. And so if I close this, or even if I do have stuff open, then what I might do, if I can't seem to locate where it is, just because it's swimming with objects on the screen, then I would go up to Window, and then I can also find the panels that I'm looking for here by name. And I think that's also important, because until you learn what these icons represent, it can be a little bit challenging. So if you know, for instance, you're looking for layers, but you can't remember that this is the layer icon, then you could say, okay, well, let me go find layers under Window, and then you would just look and find layers, for instance, or appearance or something like that, if that's what you were looking for. Because unfortunately, these do not have hover states unless you turn tooltips on. Now, if you want your tooltips turned on, yours probably are on by default if this is a new installation for you. So if you like your tooltips turned on, you can always go up to Illustrator. Oh, and also, by the way, I'm on a Mac, so in my example, I would go to Illustrator, and then I would go to Settings, and then I would go to General. If you're on Windows, you would go to Edit, Preferences, and what you want to look for is this Show Tooltips right here. If you want that visible, then you would go ahead and make sure that that's checked, and then you see whenever you hover over stuff, it will give you the tooltip. Now, the other thing that it's going to do that I find to be somewhat annoying, because I know what these things do, and it starts to get in the way of things that are happening on the screen, is that you get these kinds of little, very, very quick example illustrations and demonstrations of what the tool does. Okay, so I can leave that on for a moment, but that's something you may want to make sure is enabled until you start to get the gist of this. And then if they bother you, now you know how to turn it off. You can always go turn it back on too. The other thing too that I would like to show you is, yeah, see, it's already bothering me. So real quickly, I am going to disable it. So General, and there we go. Okay, so what I would like to show you is the control bar up here. I was about to say context bar, but this is the control bar up here, and down here, this is sort of a new thing in the newer versions of Illustrator. This is the contextual taskbar. So if I say context bar, sometimes what I actually mean by that is the control bar, which is up here at the top. And it is something that is somewhat useful. Also, you know, a lot of times what's going to be up in the control bar is also going to be in properties. And what these things do, specifically not this, but the control bar and properties, is that it will give you context about the tool that is selected and or the item that is selected on the screen. So for instance, right now, if you look in my toolbar, I've got this black arrow selected, and that is actually the selection tool. You can also access that by using the V key, right? So if I were to just click on something else, like the push pen, for instance, and then I say V, it jumps up here to the black arrow. If I go and click on something else like this polygon tool, and then I press the V key again, it jumps back up there. So to learn what some of those shortcuts are, this is one of the things that you might find useful for tooltips. So, and the other thing too is if any of these tools have a little, looks like a little corner arrow in the bottom right corner, it means that it has a tear off sheet. So I could grab this and then pull it out like this. I can click that edge, pull it out, and then just have easy access, you know, near my artwork or something if I want to switch back and forth between things while I'm working. This is particularly useful when you're doing stuff with the pen tool, for instance, and you haven't gotten accustomed to shortcut keys. But anyway, if you click and hold that, you'll also see I shouldn't say sub, you'll see alternative similarly grouped tools. And the other thing that's nice about this is that you'll also see out in parentheses, if it has a shortcut key, then it'll show you what that is. So for instance, the direct selection tool, which is this white arrow, that key is A. I already told you that the black regular object selection tool is V. So if I click V, it automatically jumps. If I click A, it jumps to the direct selection. You don't know this yet, but if I click on H, it jumps to the hand tool down here, which allows me to pan around, and we'll talk about that later. Z is going to be zoom, and things like that, right? So there are a whole bunch of different shortcuts that you'll start to get used to, and they're very useful. All right, and when you click on let's say I go back to the selection tool, you'll notice that some things over here in the properties panel changed. The the control bar, not context, the control bar up here did not change. But if I were to go and click on the text tool, you'll notice that some things over here on the right in the control bar did change. If I take this selection tool again and I actually click on something on the screen, you'll also see how things might change as well. Okay, so and the control bar that's up at the top is just kind of a shortcut. Some of the things will change, some won't, but it's nice because it's a shortcut for doing things like changing the fill color and the stroke color. So it'd be the fill, this is the stroke size, and so on. Okay. All right. So that's a really quick run through of the toolbar. The other thing too that I'd like to show you is that I'm on a Mac, and so I can undock things really easily. So if I don't want something to be where it was, if I need to move things around and have access to them in other places, I can do that. I can drag it, and then if I want to redock it, I can just take this tab and drag it right back up here until it turns blue, and then you can see that I can move the tabs around. There's my libraries, properties, and if I want to start grouping things that I'm using a lot of, like let's say that I want to add layers to that, I can drag layers out like this. I'll just collapse that again with a double-headed arrow, and then I'll drag my layers up here and I will add it right there so that I can toggle back and forth between like properties and layers, for instance. We haven't talked about layers yet, but that's something that we may end up doing, is docking these things together or something if you have that capability, if it is something that's easy to do. So, and then the other thing too about these is that you'll also oftentimes see a little hamburger menu up here. Hamburger menu is going to be the 3 stacked lines. It really is called that. If you haven't heard that before, it's a web development thing that has been used now for apps and stuff too. So it's a hamburger because I guess it looks like a stacked sandwich, but you can click that and then you can get some other contextual options for that particular panel. And you'll see that these options, right, that are about layers and things are a little bit different than say, well, and see, I don't even have that option for properties, but if I were to go to stroke, you can see that I have this option that says show options, and then it expands this out. All right, so that's useful. And you might notice if you looked closely whenever I had selected before, when I selected this object, you might notice that it gave me some stroke options, but it doesn't give me all the stroke options. And then you might also see that I can click on some of these ellipsis marks and it will automatically pop out other information that is above and beyond what is already showing. And so sometimes there are really important features that are buried in these little expansion ellipsis marks. All right. So for instance, like in this align section, these are not the only align tools that there are. If I click here, it shows me all the different options like distribution and distribute spacing and what am I supposed to align to? Am I aligning to the artboard or to, the object, etc. So, and again, we haven't gotten into all those details. I'm just showing you in terms of the interface where some of the things that you might be looking for could possibly be hidden. If you know, for instance, that you're looking for something really specifically regarding strokes and you can't find it here, then maybe you can go to, instead of just looking, in the general area about appearance, you can actually go to the stroke portion, and then you see that there's a lot more information about strokes. Like I can add a dashed line, and then once I click on that, it gives me a bunch of different options about setting up the gap and so on and so on. Okay, I do the corner points, and etc. Okay, and if you're not sure, a lot of times looking some of this stuff up is kind of intuitive. If you know that the name of something like a stroke is called stroke, you could say, well, I can't find what I'm looking for. Let me go up here to window. And is there a panel for stroke? Indeed, there is. And then it would allow you to find it. And then it highlights it here so that it helps you learn what that stroke panel actually is. So it's showing you this is the currently selected panel right here by being a little bit highlighted. It looks different. And so you can kind of pay attention to these icons as you're using the panels so you can start to learn what these different things mean. In the next lesson, we're going to talk about how you can navigate around the artwork so that you can use it the most effectively.